Again, good afternoon. My name is Sandra Moxely. I'm an LTA with the Oneonta City School District. Today's presentation is accumulation of different topics that I've researched and learned about through professional development opportunities over the past few years. Aaron and the Catskill Regional Teacher Center have given me the opportunity to share with you today, and I hope that you are able to take something new away from this presentation or maybe gain a new perspective on the brain and learning. While this topic is much larger than can be covered in an hour, I'm going to focus on 3 things that I feel will give people an introductory overview of the brain and learning. Mindset, what students need to know about the brain, and what teachers need to know about the brain. Before getting into the specifics about different parts of the brain, we're going to look at mindset. The way that we see the world around us and how we behave towards life is our mindset. We have 2 types of mindset, the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. So what is a growth mindset? This person sees goals as within reach with effort and perseverance. They see life as an adventure with failure a part of learning, and they believe that the obstacles that arise will only make you stronger. They enjoy the challenge. And you can see these 2 little pictures here. You have somebody saying, I can't do it yet, but with effort, I can. And then you have the brain lifting its weights and saying, I can train my brain to do it. So what is a fixed mindset? A person with a fixed mindset is going to see the path ahead of them as difficult, hard, and often avoid trying out of fear. Negative thoughts are common, and this person is more likely to give up. Saying I can't is a common thing among those with a fixed mindset, and they may believe that they are not good at something now. If they are not good at something now, they will never be good at it. And here you have Homer Simpson, and Homer is saying trying is the first step towards failure. He doesn't want to try because he's afraid he's going to fail. And often people that have that fixed mindset, that's their way of thinking. They don't want to attempt something if they're going to fail at it. If you go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, there you go. So here we have 2 people, one with a growth mindset and one with a fixed mindset. These are just some examples of ways in which people think with a growth mindset versus with a fixed mindset. The person with the growth mindset sees failure as opportunity to grow, while the person with a fixed mindset sees failure as a limit to their abilities. The person with a growth mindset believes that they can learn to do anything they want, while the person with a fixed mindset sees their abilities as unchangeable. They can either do it or they can't. Someone with a growth mindset sees challenges as a way to help them grow, while someone with a fixed mindset does not like to be challenged. A person with a growth mindset believes that effort and attitude determine their abilities, while a person with a fixed mindset believes their potential is predetermined. The person with the growth mindset accepts constructive feedback, while the person with a fixed mindset takes challenges and criticism personally as a strike against them. Finally, the person with the growth mindset likes to try new things, while the person with the fixed mindset tends to stick to what they know. Again, they don't want to fail, so they don't step outside their comfort zone. Any questions on any of this so far? I know I'm kind of just like going through it fast.
Yeah, so like reflectively, I bet you can think of kids in your class that demonstrate fixed and growth mindsets. And typically, if you're looking at special ed students, they tend to have very fixed mindsets, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. Oops. So here again, we have the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. Now let's pretend we have 2 people. I picked 2 friends with kind of unique names because I was hoping nobody on here would have those names. So let's pretend we have Anish, who has a growth mindset, and Cece, who has a fixed mindset. Anish is focused on improvement. While a high grade might be nice, it's not the end of the world if he doesn't get an A, as long as he learned and improved. He grasps the concept that you can learn and grow from mistakes. Cece is more focused on judgment. She wants the A, so everyone will think she's smart. Anything less will make her look stupid. With his growth mindset, Anish likes that he is learning new things and improving. He's not afraid to ask how to do something if it will help him. Challenges and failures are opportunities for him to grow and improve. Cece is a perfectionist. She will not be satisfied with anything but an A, for anything less will make her look stupid. If it comes down to it, she might even cheat to get that desired grade. She would rather take an easy class and know she'll ace it than push herself in a harder class where she might struggle to learn something she doesn't know. Next slide. Anisha's brain is most active when he receives feedback and he knows this will help him in the future. He is focused on learning and sees learning as an adventure. Cece's brain is most active when she gets that high grade. She has a fear that if she doesn't get a high mark, people will view her differently. And I know I can definitely think of like people in my life that fit in both of these categories. And I'm sure like thinking of students, you can see students who might fall in one at one point, might fall in another at another point. Yeah, so next slide, please. So Carol Dweck is a psychologist and professor at Stanford University. She is best known for her work and research in the field of motivation and mindset. This quote is from an online seminar I attended while completing the Teaching in the Age of Chronic Stress course a few years ago. Dweck says, children who understand that the brain can get smarter, who have a growth mindset, do better in school because they have an empowering perspective on learning. They focus on improvement and see effort as a way to build their abilities. They see failure as a natural part of the learning process. In contrast, students who have a fixed mindset, those who believe intelligence is fixed, tend to focus on judgment. They're more concerned with proving that they are smart or hiding that they are not. And that means they tend to avoid situations in which they might fail or might have to work hard. Next slide, please. So, how can we switch on our growth mindset? We can change our mindsets by changing our thoughts. With the power of yet, you take your negative thoughts and add yet to the end. So if you're thinking, I don't know, you could change your thought to, I don't know yet. Rather than, I can't do it yet. Rather than, I'm not good at this, maybe you could say, I'm not good at this yet. It's not, I don't understand, but I don't understand yet. And it's very common to hear students say a lot of these different phrases. And it's going to take some practice to get into the habit of saying yet, but once you add that on there, you're kind of opening up their opportunity for growth. There's a difference between not knowing and not knowing yet. Rather than quitting when you don't know, leave the window of opportunity open to learn. 1 second. Okay, so something interesting I found while researching for this was there are schools out there that rather than giving grades of failing, they will give students grades of not yet. And this gives students a path into the future. Even just thinking back to this past spring, I know a lot of schools, rather than failing kids, they gave them grades that kind of left things open-ended. And that's kind of what these other schools have been doing for a while. So I found that kind of interesting to compare. Next slide. It is important to use process-focused praise rather than person-focused praise. So again, we want to praise for effort rather than intelligence. Praising for intelligence reinforces that fixed mindset, while failure features could lead one to think that they are not capable and not challenge themselves. When you strategically praise for effort, this reinforces a growth mindset that will help one stretch their comfort zone and take on new challenges to learn new material. Next slide. How do we praise to enforce the growth mindset? This can be quite tricky, as often the praiser has to rewire their own mind and way of thinking to use their words differently. I know I am guilty of this. When a student that needs a boost gets something right, it can be easy to automatically say, great job, you are so smart. A child who has a fixed mindset will then translate this to anything less than that means they are not smart. So praise the process by saying something like, great job, your improvement shows you must have worked really hard. Now, if a student is not making progress, it can be useless to just praise the effort. Say they missed class a day where the teacher went over a key component of a topic. That student can put the effort in, but if they lack understanding or are misunderstanding, the process component will not balance out. In this instance, you could tell the student, let's look at what we have done or what strategies you can use and figure out together what we should try next. Any questions so far? If not, you can go on to the next slide, Erin.
Hold on a second. We do have a comment in the chat. It says fixed mindsets have shown to stem behaviors within our classrooms, normally in students that have OCD.
Yes, and that will be, we'll touch on that a little bit later when we get talking about the brain, on how these behaviors can tie into this. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I have to like move my thing so I can see. Okay, so we can change mindsets. We recognize, we learn, and we listen. We recognize the benefit of a growth mindset, that the brain changes and becomes more capable when we work to improve ourselves. And when we understand that the growth mindset is supported by science. We learn and we teach others about how to develop our abilities. Learning what makes an effective effort and finding strategies that work. It is by learning to develop our abilities that we strengthen the idea that we can grow our abilities and that we are in charge of our abilities. And finally, we need to listen for our fixed mindset voice. When you're cutting yourself short, add yet. Give yourself that opportunity for growth. I don't know if anybody here works in a classroom where they use Class Dojo, but there is a very cute five-part short video series on Class Dojo's YouTube channel that does an excellent job of introducing young students to the concept of mindset and brain growth using the characters from Class Dojo. So that's something that, like, if you want to introduce the mindset topic to young students, I would definitely recommend checking out Class Dojo's YouTube channel. Just look for brain growth and mindset. I think I could actually put the link in the chat if you want me to. Would anyone like that?
Yeah, good idea.
Okay, let's see. Oops. Okay, so let me get back to my. I lost my screen here. How do I? Sorry, technical difficulties for a second. How do I? Can't. There we go. Okay. So that is oops. I keep losing my screen. I'm sorry. 1 second. Where did it go?
It's hard to navigate between all the screens.
Yeah, like, I wish there was this way to split the screen. Zoom just keeps taking over my entire screen, so I can't see my other screen. Okay. Ah, why is that happening?
I think you have to manually kind of move it over. I've had that problem too.
Let's see. Yeah, no, exit full screen. Maybe, okay. That's good enough, that'll work. Okay, so that's everything on mindset. The next part we're gonna talk about is more about the brain. Does anyone have any questions on mindset before I move on? Okay, so what students need to know about the brain? If you can go to the next slide, Erin. So what is intelligence? Intelligence has to do with the ability to figure things out, think before you speak, and comprehend language. It's based on one's ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. As we touched upon while discussing mindset, you can grow your intelligence. You are not just born with a given IQ, and yes, you can control your learning. Okay, so has anybody here seen or heard about the hand model of the brain? Okay, let's see. Yes, okay. Flipping the lid, yep. Okay, let me see if I can see the chat without just every time I open the chat, their screen disappears. This might be a Chromebook problem, I'm guessing, because there we go. Okay. Okay, so to help you understand the brain, let's look at how our brains work. This is the hand model of the brain. Dan Siegel is the one that developed this, and he is a professor of psychiatry at UCLA with numerous books about the brain in the field of mental health. The hand model is often used to help children understand the brain. So you got your hand at the base of your brain. So we'll pretend that this part of the hand is your spinal cord. At the base of your brain, just above your spine, we have the automatic brain. This is your life support brain, or life support system. Sometimes we call this the downstairs brain, which we'll talk more on in a minute. This is the part of the brain that keeps your heart beating and keeps you breathing. So if nothing else were working, this part of the brain is going to keep you alive. We often tell young students to think of this as the reptile brain. When threat comes at you or you are stressed or scared, your body has three reactions. It can either fight, flight, run away, or it'll freeze. Think of an animal that is threatened. It will do the same things. Now, the upstairs brain up here, your thinking cap in the slide. Sorry. Okay, the upstairs brain has been in survival mode, so it hasn't been doing much exercise. So the downstairs brain, sorry, I just totally lost my spot here. Okay, so now the upstairs brain, you have the thinking part of the brain that helps you solve problems and learn. What happens is that with students who have experienced trauma and who have unmanaged stress, their downstairs brain has been working out. So you have your downstairs brain, this little muscle here has been working out. This part of the brain has been doing lots of push-ups, so it's been getting stronger. The upstairs brain has been in survival mode, so it hasn't been doing much exercise. So the downstairs brain takes over and is in control. You fight, you run, and you freeze. The panic button here on the downstairs brain is going off inside the brain, and new information is not finding its way in. I'm sure you can come up with many different examples, but let's say you have a student sitting in class worried about if they are going to have food to eat that day, or maybe they are hungry. Their teacher could give an entire lecture and that student's brain might not process a single word because their brain is stressed and in survival mode. I would definitely recommend, if you go to YouTube and search hand model of the brain, there's many excellent videos out there that show this in different ways. And it's just really interesting, I find, how this can affect a student's learning. Now in the next slide, we're gonna look at this from a little different viewpoint, but basically the same thing. So let's look at a different model of this. Here we have the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. Upstairs, and this is in a house model here. So upstairs is where we make good decisions, have self-control, and manage our emotions. Downstairs is where fear and worry hang out. The upstairs brain is our thinking brain, where the downstairs brain is our feeling brain. When that panic button is going off and the downstairs brain is in control, the ladder between the upstairs and the downstairs is taken away. Messages are not going between the two. You are in survival mode. And while we may be feeling many different emotions, management becomes difficult. So ideally, we need to learn to self-regulate before that downstairs brain sounds that alarm and takes away the ladder. Next slide. To review, when we flip the lid, the downstairs brain hits the panic button and is overriding the upstairs brain. The thinking brain, the upstairs brain, is no longer in communication with the downstairs brain and its emotions. As our body prepares for danger, we might fight, run, away, or freeze. When our lids are flipped, we are not thinking clearly. Interestingly, the upstairs part of our brain is not finished being built until our mid-20s. This is why children flip their lids more than adults who have learned to better manage their big feelings. Okay, next slide. Sometimes they call the downstairs brain the reptile brain too, when they're introducing it to children, because they feel that they can understand the concept of like an animal getting scared easier. So when your animal or downstairs brain is under stress, you can't think straight. Like we said before, if an animal is scared, what does it do? It runs away, it fights, it attacks, or it freezes. The same holds true for this part of your brain. When your brain is in a stress state from trauma or even something like test anxiety, your performance will suffer. The good news is that you can change this. There are strategies to overcome and rewire your brain to prevent this from happening. With practice, you can train your brain to cope with this stress. Next slide. How do we unflip our lid? So the panic button is going off here downstairs, and the upstairs brain is not communicating. We want to bring this part back down and flip the lid down. How do we do this? What we want to do is bring the lid back down and calm the downstairs brain so it can work together with the upstairs brain again. We do this through connection. Dan Siegel, who created the hand model, said that you have to name it to tame it. Identify what you are feeling. Talking to a student to help them calm down. I know it's frowned upon right now, but outside of the pandemic mode that we're in, you might give a student a hug as kind of a way of connecting with them and showing them, you're going to be okay, it's safe. Focus on breathing as a way to calm the downstairs brain down. And finally, you want to respond to the safety need or threat, not just the behavior. So shaking a finger, telling the student, stop it, you need to do this is going to require upstairs brain processing. Students who have experienced trauma and are operating out of the downstairs brain are not going to register what you're asking of them, because the ability to regulate those emotions need the upstairs brain to communicate with the downstairs brain. And if that communication is not there, it's just the panic button going off. Okay, so learning with stress. When one's stress is down, their interest is up. Information can pass into your thinking brain where you can process and reflect on information. When one's stress is up, their interest is down. And if the information passing into your downstairs automatic brain, one of three things will typically happen. This information is either ignored, you fight or act out, maybe you are interpreting a simple question asked by the teacher the wrong way and you snap, or you avoid what's going on around you altogether, you space out, or you daydream. With all three of these scenarios, it is unlikely that you will process any new information or remember it. You can help your brain grow. Yes, it is possible to help our brains grow. To learn something, we practice it. As we practice it, our brain changes and gets stronger. This is just like when you lift weights and your muscles get stronger. Using your brain, acquiring and learning new information will help your brain grow. To get more into the specific part of it, scientific part of this, your brain has billions of neurons that communicate information to all parts of the brain. When you practice something, these connections in your brain multiply and get stronger. Once these neurons are strengthened, your memory and ability to work will become easier. When you use your brain gets smarter. Next. So what is a neuron? Let's take a quick look at a neuron. Neurons build memories by sending messages to other neurons through dendrites and axons. The picture like the center of the nucleus. So here you can see we have two neurons side by side. Picture the center of the nucleus of the neuron like the center of a sunshine shaped figure. And the dendrites are like the rays that are shooting out of the sunshine. Now, to send a message to another neuron, an axon is going to extend towards the dendrites of another neuron, and the tips of the axon will branch out and make a connection with the dendrites of a second neuron. Your brain has billions of these neurons. They each store bits of information that connect together to make your memory. Okay. There are three elements that help to control what information your brain takes in. First, you have the reticular activating system, or RAS. The RAS filter only lets in information that you focused on most. When you are focused, information will make it into your thinking brain. When you are overwhelmed, stressed, your active downstairs brain takes over. Next, we have the limbic system, which is the downstairs brain. The amygdala is in the center of the brain and routes information based on your emotional state. This is the alarm center of the brain. If you are in a negative emotional state, the amygdala's filter takes up excess nutrients and oxygen, sending your brain into survival mode and preventing information from entering the prefrontal cortex, which is that upstairs cap of the brain, where thinking takes place. Once you calm, it's much easier for the amygdala to send new information to the upper part of the brain, or the prefrontal cortex. The hippocampus links new sensory input to already stored memories and past experiences, creating new relational memories. Neurons connect through axons and dendrites. When you review or practice something learned, dendrites grow between neurons that hold the memory, helping the memory stay in your brain. The third element that helps to control what information your brain takes in is dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that carries electrical messages across a gap, a synapse, from one neuron to another. So in the picture of the two neurons side by side, you had the rays coming out of the one and the rays coming out of the other. And you can see on the right side of the screen there's synapses between the blue rays, I guess they could say, and the pink rays. Those are the synapses. And so the brain releases extra dopamine when an experience is enjoyable, and the dopamine helps connect the two neurons together. Positive emotions result in dopamine traveling to more parts of the brain and activating more neurons. Not only will your own sense of pleasure increase with increased dopamine, other neurotransmitters are activated and result in increased alertness, memory, and executive functions in the prefrontal cortex of the thinking upstairs brain. Managing brain stress. So what can you do to help your upstairs brain stay in control? Practice and prepare. Preparation will help to ease your stress and avoid the panic button from going off. Get adequate sleep. I'm sure we all know students who just can't focus because they are not getting enough sleep, and this ends up being a snowball effect throughout their day. Exercise. That's pretty straightforward. You can definitely clear your mind through exercise and I know when I exercise, like, it's just like no matter how stressful my day is, I always feel better. Take short breaks to check and reflect on your emotions. If you sense an emotion creeping up that might sound an alarm, name it and tame it. Keep a positive attitude and find ways to laugh. Laughter is always good. Visualize. Picture yourself in a peaceful, happy place. This will help to calm you. Okay. And what can teachers do to help their students? They can teach students how the brain works so that they know that they can change their own brains. This is definitely something I wish I had known when I was middle school, high schooler. I can't tell you how many times when I started researching this information, I like sat there thinking, wow, this is me. Teachers can set up lessons to include fun and feel-good activities. People will remember more of what they hear and read if they are in a positive emotional state. Again, releasing the dopamine when they to connect the neurons when they hear or read whatever they're studying. Okay, so the third part we're going to talk about is what the teachers need to know about the brain. Next slide. So giving teachers knowledge. Teachers who are prepared with knowledge of the workings of the brain will have the optimism, incentive, and motivation to follow the ongoing research and apply their findings in the classroom. Ideally, it would be great if all teachers had a growth mindset while looking at their students' potential and understood how stress and trauma impact learning. Teachers who understand how the brain turns input into long-term memory and memory into transferable knowledge will be best prepared to guide students to their potential. Help students make connections between new and previous knowledge if possible. So what is neuroplasticity? Has anyone heard of neuroplasticity before? Just curious, because I'd never heard of it until I started studying this. Okay. So research has proven that IQ is not fixed at birth and that brain development and intelligence are plastic. Internal environmental stimuli constantly change the structure and function of neurons and their connections. Through neuroplasticity, interneuron connections continue to be pruned or constructed in response to learning and experiences throughout our lives. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It adapts like plastic. So as you learn new information, your brain is growing, but at the same time, the connections with information you are no longer using is fading. Sorry. As we looked at earlier, new learning, working memory, occurs in the prefrontal cortex, cap of your brain. When stressed, the amygdala, the panic button, switches input and output away from the prefrontal cortex down to the lower brain, where behavior reactive responses are involuntary, fight, flight, freeze responses. When your brain is under stress, you act out and zone out. These responses are not necessarily voluntary choices, nor do they reflect a student's academic potential. This is the downstairs brain taking over. When the stressors build, new learning is not retained. So again, like when that panic button's going off and the downstairs brain is taking over, new information is not going to be absorbed or learned. How do we learn? Practice, practice, practice. The things you repeatedly do are the things your brain and mind will continue to support and encourage. These connections are strengthened when information is presented so that relationships with existing stored memory are made. The brain's own patterning system increases successful memory acquisition. So patterning in the brain, building brain connections. So how does the brain change? Think about you are trying to learn a new language. At the beginning, we learn a few words. And if you look at this picture here, if we're going to be going from the left side of the screen to the right. So the beginning, we learn a few words. You have a few, like a couple of bright spots, not a whole lot of connection lines going between them. As we build our vocabulary, we are able to say more and more things. Maybe we start talking to native speakers in that language or go to a country where it is used and we can practice it more fluently. That would be like we start talking, maybe picture the second image, and then the third one we're talking fluently. Now, life happens, and then we don't have a need to know that language anymore. So we stop talking it, and we stop practicing it. Those connections are weakening, as you see in the fourth little icon there. Think of the things you may have learned in high school, and if you were asked to recall them now, you may say, wow, it's been so long since I last looked at that or thought about that subject. These connections in your brain that are not used become weak. I'm sure everybody can relate to that like just you might start working with a new group of students on something that you haven't studied in years, and you're like, wow, it's been forever since I've studied that. Okay, next. So there are both positives and negatives to the plasticity of the brain. On the bright side, neuroplasticity makes your brain resilient. It enables you to recover from certain brain injuries and some birth abnormalities. It enables you to learn new ways of being and responding to conflict. And it allows you to overcome things like depression, addiction, obsessive compulsive patterns, ADHD, and other issues. After a setback, you can often find a new way to do things. On the flip side, neuroplasticity means that the brain is always learning, but it's neutral and doesn't necessarily know the difference between good and bad. If it's learning whatever is practiced and repeated, it could be picking up bad habits, actions, and thoughts. So neuroplasticity can also help to establish things we might not want, like depressive, anxious, obsessive, and overreactive patterns. Knowledge is power. Without intervention, stressors build, and loss of memory access to the prefrontal cortex for memory construction means that new memory is not retained. Students and uninformed teachers often believe that nothing better can be expected. The stress state of the brain becomes their normal. They learn to accept what they know. So you want them like always kind of striving to improve. Again, adding yet to all those I can't yet. And yeah. Next slide. Am I frozen?
Did you do this one already?
Okay. Oh no, there's two parts to it. Oh wait. Okay, nope, we're good now. I think my computer lagged maybe. What can teachers do? When possible, present information in ways that emphasize relationships to previously taught materials or concepts, thus helping to increase memory acquisition. Develop a working knowledge about how different stressors affect learning and memory retention, and how different students will have different stressors. The connections you make with your students is important, knowing their stressors so you can help them from sounding their panic button. I'm sure we all know students who have certain triggers, and triggers are often a lot of times like sounding their panic button. Something that sets off one student might not set off another student, but once that panic button is set, then you have to kind of go at it from, okay, how am I going to bring them back, calm them down? You want to bring the top part of their brain down so that they can have access to learning. Next slide. One ominous task, differentiation of instruction for students can make a world of difference for students who find themselves in a stressed state of mind due to boredom from not being able to relate to the materials, from having previously mastered the materials, from frustration due to repeated past failures of the subject matter. This doesn't have to be as difficult as it might sound. You don't necessarily need to create individualized tests for every single student, but Think of a student whose IEP might say that they get their test read to them. If they struggle with reading and comprehending what they read, you are essentially taking what might be a stressor away from them and reading their test to them. So that would be like a differentiation of materials to help them overcome that stressor. And I mean, obviously there's other issues, like they're struggling with reading, but still like make it as easy as possible. This is just one example of many different ways differentiation can help reduce student stressors. Exposure. Lastly, let's look at exposure. Studies show that the earlier children are exposed to words and experiences, the better. Providing exposure early on allows students to connect the pieces easier when they go to school. With prior exposure, students are able to develop patterns of what's familiar and what goes together, thus creating a more comfortable learning environment with less stress for the student. Think of early intervention services or even playgroups where young children learn how to interact with each other and the world around them. You often hear the phrase, "You're a product of your environment." What does the environment look like? For some students, it might be very traumatic and stressful, and identifying these things can help students overcome that and reach their true potential. So I'm going to end with a quote that I've always liked and I feel ties in here. Tell me and I forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I'll understand. Really, it's seeing the connection with students and building from there, making those connections. I mean, I know a lot of, I don't know, is everybody here LTAs or do we have teachers too? But I know a lot of LTAs are able to form very special connections with the students they work with, because they work with them on a more one-to-one basis than many people do. And so they learn their students, they know what their triggers are, they know their background, that like, you know, maybe they see a student struggling and they might know like, oh, I wonder if they got breakfast, that type of thing. So any questions?